66997 grit, but we got to talk about Texas. It's just become madness. And allow me to bring my full-throated defense and praise for the Texas Democrats. Now, okay, let's talk about the bill. The two bills that the Republican Party passed. Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 3. Okay, these were passed in their committees this past Sunday. Now, if you're going to follow the big lie, and when you deal with someone, a relative, a loved one, a coworker who wants to push the Trump lie that he won the election, and we're going to be talking about it a lot tonight, and I think for the next couple of years, because it appears the 2024 presidential campaign will be all about grievance and vengeance for an election that was stolen from us. But you have to believe this towering, festering, corrosive pile of monkey dung, you have to believe that the Democratic Party rigged the election so that Joe Biden would win in a landslide, an electoral landslide. And the Democrats wouldn't win the Senate until about a month later because it was going to be too close to call in Georgia and they'd have to have two runoffs. You have to believe the Democrats rigged it so they'd win the White House, not win the Senate, and lose votes in the House. You have to believe all this. Okay, just before we get into it, this is the level of bullshit we're dealing with. They want you to believe the Democrats rigged the election, and the Democrats did not. This was the most secure election in our country's history. That's not me saying that. That's Donald Trump's own Director of Homeland Security saying that. Donald Trump lost. And everyone knows he's lost except the dumbest and the most sinister. And that's who we're going to talk about. Because again, it was a landslide victory for Joe Biden. 306 electoral college votes. Donald Trump had 232. To win the White House, you need 270. It was not even close. More people turned out to vote than ever before in history. And it happened during a plague. Biden beat Trump in every battleground state. Biden beat him in Michigan. He beat him in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada. And he beat him in Georgia. He flipped Georgia. Georgia hadn't gone for a Democrat since 1992 when Bill Clinton carried the state. So sane people, honest people, and smart people can look at this and say, well, there you go. I mean, Donald Trump was very controversial. He lost the popular vote the first time. He ran against the most unpopular nominee in the Democratic Party's history. Whether it's fair or not to Secretary Clinton, she was the most unpopular nominee. And to be fair to her, Donald Trump was the Republican Party's most unpopular nominee back in 2016. But it wasn't that way in 2020. He ran against Joe Biden. Joe Biden beat him. And except for Oklahoma, you don't hear these people claiming that he beat him too much in the states where he won, right? I mean, there is voter fraud, and it's on tape, and it's Donald Trump trying to strong-arm the Georgia Secretary of State into changing the election results and finding 11,000 votes, not making sure it's the most accurate count, not rooting out any possible fraud. No, he ordered him. It's on tape to find exactly enough votes to make him the winner of the state. It's all corruption. It's all lies. It's all bullshit, okay? Which brings us to Texas. Now, Joe Biden said today, this was the 21st century Jim Crow assault. He said it's real. And he said no other election that has ever been held under such scrutiny and such high standards. The big lie is just that, a big lie. And as you guys know, this year 17 states have already enacted 28 laws to make it harder to vote. You know why Joe Biden did as well as he did? Partially because he was running against a monster, partially because many states did a lot of things to make it easy for folks to vote during a pandemic. It wasn't safe. And this being America, you should be able to vote very easily, however you like to vote, as long as it's legal and you're registered, right? That's the way it should be. That's what Democrats are fighting for with H.R. 1, with the John Lewis bill, to make it really easy for eligible Americans to vote however they like to vote, as easily as possible. But you have to believe in democracy for that. And the Republican Party knows the numbers are not on their side. They know the demographics are not on their side. The Republican Party has lost the popular vote for president in 7 of the last 8 presidential elections. Let's go back to 1992, shall we? From 1992 onward, they've lost the popular vote 7 out of 8 times. They could change their ideas and be more popular, but they don't want to do that. Instead, they want to rig it so they can keep their unpopular ideas and keep on winning elections. And that happens by making it harder for other people to vote, not just black folks, low-income people, young people, seniors. So this bill that they have, here's what it's going to do. Again, it's only designed in a state Donald Trump won to make it harder for people to vote. They're going to ban after-hours voting. How does that fight fraud? There was no voter fraud. There was no voter fraud in Texas. These are solutions in search of a problem, except they're not solutions. They're trying to make it a little harder here, a little harder there. It's going to prohibit ballot drop boxes in drive-through voting centers. How does prohibiting drive-through voting centers fight voter fraud? They're going to mandate all weekday early voting take place sometime between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m., although the draft language would limit Sunday early voting to a maximum between the hours of 1 p.m. and 9 p.m. That's so black folks can't go voting after church. That's the only reason. We'll get more deep on that in a minute. It's going to make it illegal for election officials to send applications to vote by mail to people who did not request one. They make it easier to vote, right? Hey, everyone, here's your application. It's not forcing you to vote. It's giving you an application so you can. It's going to bar counties from helping facilitate the distribution of unsolicited ballot requests. It's going to require voters who are requesting absentee ballots to show their driver's license or their social security number on both their request for a ballot and on their return envelope containing their ballot. And let's just say some elderly person or some person who might not have English as a first language but is a citizen, or someone who just doesn't understand. If they don't put the social security number and the driver's license number on both their request for the ballot and the return envelope containing the ballot, their vote gets thrown out. It's going to impose $1,000 a day fines on any local election officials who don't follow these procedures to update their voter rolls. It's going to have criminal penalties on election workers who obstruct poll watchers. And it would make it easier to overturn an election. It would allow courts to throw out results if enough ballots were cast illegally that it could have made a difference, despite the fact that there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud in Texas or anywhere else. So, again, there's a lot of media coverage on these Democrats in Texas. This is what they're protesting. All these ways the Republican Party in Texas is using to be shitty to democracy and make it harder. So now, well, I mean, the provision closing polls until 1 p.m. on the last Sunday of early voting, that's when Souls to the Polls events are popular in black churches. Folks go to mass in the morning, go to services in the morning, and then they go vote. Those election workers want to go to church too. The greatest number of people who vote on Sundays are African Americans. This targets voters of color. This targets voters with disabilities by getting rid of the drive-through voting centers. This is in a state that's already the most difficult place to vote in the country. An analysis by the Texas Civil Rights Project concluded that in the November election, non-white voters in Harris County took advantage of 10 drive-through polling sites at higher rates than white voters. And it worked, and there was no fraud. So they're banning that. No 24-hour voting. You get the idea, right? So Texas Democrats fled the state yesterday to block this bill. And wisely, they came to D.C. to rub it in Joe Manchin's face and plead with Congress to act on voting rights today because the government has to do something. The government has to save democracy. One person, one vote has always been endangered. But now, the time is running short. I mean, like, they don't know what they're going to do. Scores of these legislators fled Texas yesterday to deny Republicans a quorum in the State House and stop them from passing these shitty laws that'll bar a lot of different voting practices that are used in heavily Democratic, or let's just say majority non-white counties in 2020, and it's going to tighten the rules for mail voting. That's what it is. And again, the Texas Democrats are literally walking out of Texas because Texas Republicans are walking out on America. And it was intricately plotted, too. They left their posts, and they left the entire state. They took flight to Washington. Maybe you saw some of the footage of them all on the news, on a mission to halt these restrictive voting bills that are anti-democratic, that make it harder for American citizens to exercise their rights to vote. And it's all based on Donald Trump's lies. There was no voting fraud. No voting fraud that would have impacted the outcome of any election. Of course there was voting fraud. There's always people who vote accidentally, vote illegally, they don't know they're not allowed to vote, and Donald Trump committed voter fraud. It's on bloody tape. These 50 House Democratic leaders have vowed to stay away from the state until at least August 7th, when the 30-day special session will end. So this is going to deny Republicans the 2/3 attendance level they need to conduct business. You can't do anything in the legislature if you don't have 2/3 of the legislature there. The Democrats are hoping they can hold off the passage of the law to give them time to try to convince senators to pass these new federal measures that would supersede their state's legislation, which will probably pass. I mean, they can let the clock run out, but it's going to happen again in the next session, unless the Democratic Party and maybe one or two Republicans in the Senate with souls pass a law enshrining democracy. This gamble, to me, is the greatest act of civil disobedience we have seen by elected officials in years. So Governor Abbott is now threatening all of them with arrest as soon as they return. And the Texas Republicans who hung around voted 76-4 to authorize state troopers to find and corral the absent Democrats under warrant, if necessary. He's going to arrest them like if they were a black man who waited 6 hours in line to vote on Election Day and was the last person to vote and made headlines for being the man who waited 6 hours to vote at 1 a.m. And then they found out he was a felon and he didn't know he wasn't allowed to vote. And now that man's in jail on $100,000 bail. $100,000 bail for a black man in his 60s who peacefully voted because he didn't know he wasn't allowed. He thought he'd paid his debt. And the White House has, made some comments. We'll get to that. Kamala Harris has praised them for their actions in support of voting rights, gave a strong endorsement talking about their extraordinary courage and commitment. And you know what? They are. It took guts to run away. They ran away to protect democracy. There's no other example of this. There's no other way you can spin this. And it's pretty savvy. And it's stunning how the U.S. political system is on the edge of a meltdown as the result of controversy triggered by lies from a reality TV star who lost the popular vote twice and was impeached twice. And these lies are now taken as fact by millions of dumb fucking white people, many of whom we love and are related to. And we love them, but they're fucking dumb. Or they're fucking evil. You know what I'm talking about. There's no evidence of widespread fraud in Texas or anywhere else in last November's election. Multiple efforts by Trump to prove there was have been thrown out of court, often by judges appointed by Republican presidents. Over 60 cases were laughed out of court, some with extreme prejudice. Several of Donald Trump's lawyers are facing sanction or possible disbarment for being part of this lie. And they're still pushing it. Robbie, I want to play A3. This is Joe Biden earlier today in his speech talking about how these anti-voting laws are spreading and we have to stop them.
This year alone, 17 states have enacted, not just proposed, but enacted 28 new laws to make it harder for Americans to vote. Not to mention, and catch this, nearly 400 additional bills Republican members of the state legislatures are trying to pass.
Bill in Pennsylvania.
21st century Jim Crow assault is real. It's unrelenting. And we're going to challenge it vigorously.
Didn't mean to step on the president. Bill in Pennsylvania. Good evening and welcome. You're on Sirius XM.